From a stellar critical reception to insane viewership numbers, The Last of Us has been a massive hit for HBO. And yet, some toxic fans can't get over the fact that it has queer characters. Don't worry though, because Bella Ramsey is here to shut down the haters. And honestly, love that about her. After all, the concept of being mad about queer The Last of Us characters doesn't make any sense. I mean, even the original game had a bunch of them back in 2013. In fact, Ellie herself is openly gay in both the games and the show. So, it's wild how there's been a homophobic backlash against it. With that said, everyone involved with the series clearly understands the assignment, which is why they weren't gonna stand for any of this either. Ramsey was the first one to come out against it, however, saying that anyone who's upset about gay storylines within the HBO show should just get used to it. Now, if you didn't already know, the majority of this backlash came off the back of episode 3, which told a super emotional gay love story between Bill and Frank, who are played by Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett, respectively. But while the story of this particular episode wasn't exactly present in the original game, it was still established in the lore of the franchise. After all, even if we don't meet Frank's character in the game, Bill still calls him his partner and heavily implies a romantic bond. Though, let's be fair, even if they did make up the story from scratch, it really shouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, The Last of Us is a franchise that's full of queer people. Like, even Ellie herself has been in multiple gay relationships throughout her life. Not to mention, there are some super well-written trans characters as well, which, sadly, is another thing that's been receiving backlash and is leading to the show being review-bombed on IMDb. Now, there's a greater discussion to be had here about how video game fans, or frankly, most entertainment fandoms, can be incredibly toxic. So much so that they're ready to resort to homophobia, transphobia, or other abhorrent methods just to undermine something they don't like. Thankfully, however, none of it seems to have had an effect on anyone making the show. In fact, if anything, the backlash seems to have brought everyone together. Ramsey, for instance, expanded upon her earlier remark while speaking with GQ magazine and said that since the series will closely follow the storyline of the games, we can also expect Ellie to get into a relationship with Dina in Season 2. What's more, she also talked about how she hopes to stay true to Ellie and her original roots. Not to mention, she wants Lev, who was a trans teenager in the sequel, to be a part of the show at some point as well. As far as all the backlash is concerned, well, Ramsey isn't anxious about it either. She even mentioned how people will always want to think what they want to think, but that won't change the way they make the show. As a matter of fact, she went as far as to say that if you don't want to watch the show due to a gay storyline or whatever, then that's purely on you, and you're just missing out. Besides, everyone involved with the actual process of making the show is fully on board with the notion. Not to mention, it sorta comes from a place of defiance for the young actor as well. After all, Bella Ramsey herself identifies as non-binary, so in a way, she knows exactly what she's dealing with here, which in turn also makes her feel more invested in her role as Ellie. Oh, and speaking of her role, she also revealed that she wore a chest binder for 90% of filming during the first season. Why? Well, because apparently, this helped her focus better on set. You know what's great about this? Ramsey said that her co-star, Pedro Pascal, is also super supportive of her decision. Though, to be fair, that's to be expected from an absolute king like him. I mean, where do you even start with this guy? He's been one of the biggest advocates for social justice since day one. Not to mention, his own sister is also transgender, and he's got a great relationship with her as well. So for Ramsey, having someone like him alongside her was extremely helpful. In fact, she even mentioned how they'd often discuss sexual identity between takes. Now, she did clarify that it wasn't always a deep conversation or anything like that, but the fact that they were just so honest with each other was great. And honestly, you love to see it. Besides, their chemistry shines through on screen, so we fans are eating. That being said, Ramsey wasn't the only star to address the homophobic backlash. In fact, Nick Offerman came to the rescue as well. Yup, and to be fair, he kinda had to. After all, it was his character that was the main topic of discussion in this whole saga. But of course, he wasn't having any of it. In fact, he responded to a now-deleted hateful tweet about his character, saying that the critics' brand of ignorance and hate was exactly why they made stories like this. That was just the start, though, because in an interview a few days later, he went even deeper into the whole thing. Firstly, he admitted that he always expected a reaction like this. And I mean, with the way people have reacted to any sort of queerness in the media over the past few years, that's fair. But again, the dude just exudes so much charisma, because after this, he quoted Bertolt Brecht and said that if you're not pissing off a third of your audience, then it's not art. Yeah, give him the knockout punch. Offerman then elaborated his stance, saying that he hopes people understand just how much love was put into making this. Oh, and he had a fascinating sandwich-related analogy as well. You know how you can make a sandwich that 9 people like, but there will always be one person who won't like one of the ingredients? Yeah, I feel you, Nick. Honestly, it's just been great to see this pushback from everyone involved with the show. Plus, it just shows that they aren't gonna back down due to some people's fragile egos. There is one thing that needs to be addressed, however, and it's the ever-increasing toxicity within fandoms. The reaction to The Last of Us is a perfect example. It seems like people just aren't able to accept someone else for their own identity, something that doesn't affect them at all. Oh, and as I've mentioned earlier, this is perhaps even more prevalent within the gaming spheres. For instance, a 2019 survey by the Anti-Defamation League found that almost 3/4 of adults who play games online have faced harassment. But what's really concerning is that half of those were targeted over their identities, which, I mean, just shouldn't be a thing. The actor Rahul Kohli summed it up perfectly in his social media post, because according to him, if The Last of Us is too progressive or diverse for someone, they just need to stop watching. Besides, there are other stories that avoid representation, and they could just go and watch them instead. After all, it's not like gay characters are this brand new concept for a franchise like The Last of Us. In fact, this has been their story all along, and the show is literally one of the most faithful adaptations we've ever seen. So all this review bombing and negative reactions are not based on anything other than pure hatred and toxicity. And on that note, this was The Last of Us cast's reaction to all the homophobic backlash. See you in the next one!